My name is Priya, and the man I trusted with my heart, my secrets, and my most vulnerable moments just became my worst nightmare. What started as love turned into blackmail, and what he thought would destroy me. Well, let's just say karma has a way of turning the tables. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 3 months ago, I was planning a future with Marcus. We'd been together for 2 years, and I genuinely believed he was the one. He was charming, successful, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the world. I should have seen the red flags, but love has a way of making you blind to the obvious. It started small. He'd check my phone when I wasn't looking, question who I was texting, and get jealous when I spent time with friends. I told myself it was because he cared so much. I convinced myself that his possessiveness was passion. God, I was so naive. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. I was at his apartment, cooking dinner like I did every week, when his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up, and I saw a notification that made my blood run cold. It was a message from someone named Ashley, with a heart emoji next to her name. The preview showed enough to know this wasn't just friendship. My hands were shaking as I picked up his phone. I know I shouldn't have looked, but something in my gut told me I needed to know the truth. What I found destroyed everything I thought I knew about the man I loved. Messages upon messages with multiple women, photos they'd sent him, photos he'd sent them. And then I saw something that made me physically sick. Screenshots of our private conversations, intimate photos I'd sent him in confidence, all saved in a folder labeled insurance. When Marcus walked back into the kitchen and saw me holding his phone, his entire demeanor changed. The loving boyfriend disappeared, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "You had no right to go through my phone," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "Insurance?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You saved our private messages as insurance?" He didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he smiled, this twisted, cruel smile that I'd never seen before. "Those photos, those messages where you told me your deepest secrets, where you opened up about your family problems, your work drama, everything. I have all of it, Priya. And I have those beautiful pictures you sent me when you were feeling generous." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you better think very carefully about how you want to handle this situation. You walk out that door, you cause any problems for me, and everyone you know gets to see a very different side of you. Your family, your coworkers, your boss. They'll all get a very detailed look at who Priya really is behind closed doors." The room started spinning. This man, who I'd shared my bed with, who I'd introduced to my parents, who I'd been planning a future with, was threatening to destroy my life. "You wouldn't," I managed to say. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew he absolutely would. "Try me," he said, crossing his arms. "You think you're so pure, so perfect. Let's see how perfect you look when I share those photos of you in that red lingerie set. Remember those? The ones you sent me for our anniversary? I bet your conservative family would love to see those." I felt physically sick. Those photos were taken in a moment of love and trust. I'd been nervous about sending them, but he'd convinced me it was beautiful, that it was just between us. Now he was using them as weapons. And those messages where you talked about your sister's addiction problems, the ones where you said you were embarrassed by your family, I wonder how they'd feel knowing what you really think of them. Every word was a knife twisting deeper. He wasn't just threatening to share intimate photos. He was threatening to weaponize every vulnerable moment I'd shared with him. "Please," I whispered, hating myself for begging but not knowing what else to do. "Don't do this." "Then don't. Make me?" he said simply. "Stay. Pretend none of this happened. Keep being my girlfriend and your secrets stay safe." I stood there in his kitchen, the smell of burning dinner filling the air, and realized I had two choices: submit to his blackmail and live as his prisoner, or fight back and risk losing everything. But as I looked at this man who had just shown me his true face, I made a third choice, one that he never saw coming. I picked up my purse, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "Do whatever you think you need to do, Marcus, but this is over." His confident smirk faltered for just a second. "You're bluffing. You won't risk it." "Watch." "Me," I said, and walked out of his apartment. But I wasn't walking into defeat. I was walking into war, and Marcus had no idea what he'd just started. As I drove home that night, my phone was already buzzing with notifications. He was making good on his threats. But what he didn't know was that I'd been recording our entire conversation on my phone, tucked discreetly in my back pocket. The game was just beginning, and I was about to show him that threatening the wrong woman was the biggest mistake of his life. My boyfriend threatened to leak my MMS. I gave his phone to the court. Part 2, walking out of Marcus's apartment, was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the smartest. Because while he thought he held all the cards, I was about to show him that sometimes the person you underestimate is the one who destroys you. The notifications started before I even reached my car. Photos of me in intimate moments, private messages where I'd confided my deepest fears, screenshots of conversations where I'd vented about work, all being sent to a group chat that included my family members, co-workers, and friends. My phone was buzzing nonstop like a bomb going off in my hands. But here's what Marcus didn't know about me. I don't break. I adapt. The first thing I did was turn off my phone. Complete digital silence. Then I drove straight to my best friend Sarah's house. She's a lawyer, and if anyone could help me navigate this nightmare, it was her. "He's committing multiple felonies," Sarah said after I played her the recording I'd made. "Revenge porn, extortion, harassment. This isn't just about hurt feelings, Priya. This is criminal." "But the damage is already done," I said, feeling the weight of humiliation crushing down on me. "Everyone I know has seen those photos, those messages. My reputation is destroyed." Sarah grabbed my shoulders and looked me straight in the eyes. "Listen to me. He thinks he's won because he's caused you pain. But pain is temporary. Prison sentences aren't." That's when she explained something that changed everything. Marcus had made a crucial mistake. He'd sent those intimate images and private messages through multiple platforms, crossing state lines since some of my family lived in different states. This wasn't just local harassment, it was federal. "We're going to bury him," Sarah said with a determination that gave me chills. "But first we need to gather everything." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The next morning, I did something Marcus never expected. Instead of hiding in shame, instead of begging him to stop, I went on the offensive. I contacted every person who'd received those messages and photos. I explained the situation, told them about the recording I had, and asked for their help in documenting everything he'd sent. My family was devastated, not because of what they'd seen, but because someone I'd trusted had violated me so completely. My mom cried when I called her, but then she said something that made me realize how strong the women in my family really are. "Baby, he thought he could use your love against you. He thought he could make you small. But we didn't raise you to be small." My co-workers at the marketing firm where I worked were incredible. Instead of judgment, they offered support. My boss, Mrs. Rodriguez, called me personally to let me know that not only was my job secure, but the company would provide any resources I needed to pursue legal action. But the real turning point came when I decided to check Marcus's social media. He'd been posting cryptically about crazy exes and dodging bullets. He was actually bragging about what he'd done, playing the victim while destroying my life. That's when I remembered something important. Marcus worked for a high-profile tech company with strict morality clauses in their employment contracts. Companies that dealt with sensitive data and had zero tolerance for criminal behavior. I made copies of everything: the recording, screenshots, of his social media posts, documentation of every message he'd sent to my contacts. Then I did something he never saw coming. I didn't just go to the police. I went to his employer first. I scheduled a meeting with his company's HR director and legal team. I walked into that conference room with a folder full of evidence and a calm determination that surprised even me. Need to report criminal behavior by one of your employees, I said, laying out the documentation methodically. Marcus Thompson has been using company devices to distribute intimate images without consent, which violates both state and federal laws. The HR director's face went white as she reviewed the evidence. The legal team immediately started taking notes. What I learned in that meeting changed everything. Marcus hadn't just threatened me with those photos and messages. He'd actually sent them using his company laptop and phone during work hours. He'd used company email accounts to create fake profiles on social media where he was sharing more intimate content. He'd been so arrogant, so confident that he'd never face consequences, that he'd left a digital trail leading directly back to his workplace. We need to preserve all digital evidence immediately, the legal team told HR. This creates massive liability for the company. Within hours, Marcus was suspended pending investigation. His company access was revoked, his devices were confiscated, and suddenly, the man who thought he held all the power found himself completely powerless. But I wasn't done. While his company was building their case, Sarah and I were building ours. We filed police reports in multiple jurisdictions. We contacted the FBI's cybercrimes division since he'd crossed state lines. We documented every single violation, every law he'd broken, every life he'd tried to destroy. And then we did something that would make him realize just how badly he'd underestimated me. We turned his own tactics against him. Remember how he'd kept all those screenshots and photos as insurance? Well, I'd been keeping insurance too. Every manipulative text he'd sent over the course of our relationship, every time he'd tried to isolate me from friends and family, every red flag I'd ignored because I thought I loved him. I created a comprehensive timeline of psychological abuse, documenting the pattern of control and manipulation that had led to his final criminal act. It painted a picture of a man who was dangerous, calculated, and completely without remorse. The night before our court date, my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Priya, please." His voice was different now, desperate, scared. "I've lost my job. The police came to my apartment. This has gone too far." "Too far?" I laughed, and I could hear the shock in his silence. He'd never heard me laugh like that before. Cold, confident, completely unafraid. "Marcus, this is just the beginning. I'll delete everything. I'll make it stop. Just please, drop the charges. You should have thought about consequences before you tried to destroy my life," I said. "See you in court." As I hung up, I realized something had fundamentally changed inside me. The scared, ashamed woman who'd walked out of his apartment was gone. In her place was someone who knew her worth, someone who refused to be a victim, someone who was about to make sure Marcus never hurt another woman again. Tomorrow, I was going to walk into that courtroom and show him what real power looked like. My boyfriend threatened to leak my MMS. I gave his phone to the court. Part 3. The morning of the court hearing, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Completely fearless. Today wasn't just about justice for me. It was about making sure Marcus could never do this to another woman again. I dressed carefully that morning. Professional, confident, unbreakable. As I walked into the courthouse, I saw Marcus for the first time since that night in his kitchen. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, the confident swagger completely gone. His expensive lawyer was whispering urgently in his ear, but Marcus kept glancing at me with a mixture of fear and disbelief. He still couldn't understand how his victim had become his judge. The prosecutor, Ms. Williams, had built an airtight case. Federal charges for distributing intimate images across state lines, state charges for harassment and extortion, and civil charges for intentional infliction of emotional distress. But the real devastation came when she presented the evidence. "Your Honor," Ms. Williams began, "the defendant systematically collected intimate images and private communications for the express purpose of using them as weapons against the victim. But more than that, he documented his own criminal intent." She played the recording I'd made that night in his kitchen. Hearing Marcus's voice in that courtroom, coldly threatening to destroy my life, made several people in the gallery gasp audibly. His own words condemned him more powerfully than any testimony could. But then came the moment that changed everything. Additionally, Your Honor, during the investigation, law enforcement discovered that the defendant had been engaging in this pattern of behavior with multiple victims over several years. My blood ran cold. Multiple victims. Marcus had done this before. The prosecutor continued, "We have evidence of at least 7 other women who were subjected to similar treatment by Mr. Thompson. The defendant kept detailed files on each victim, including their personal information, intimate photos, and private communications. He referred to these as his collection." I turned to look at Marcus, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw him for what he truly was. Not just a man who'd betrayed me, but a predator who had made destroying women his hobby. "Furthermore," the prosecutor said, pulling out a familiar device, "this is the defendant's personal cell phone, voluntarily surrendered by his former employer, when they discovered he'd been using company devices for criminal activity." She held up Marcus's phone like it was Exhibit A in a murder trial. And in a way, it was. The murder of his freedom. This device contains over 3,000 images and messages from his victims, organized in folders with disturbing labels. Photos he had no right to possess, conversations he screenshotted without consent, and detailed notes about each woman's vulnerabilities and how to exploit them. The judge's expression grew darker with each revelation. Marcus's lawyer was frantically shuffling papers, but there was no defense for what was on that phone. "Your Honor, the defendant didn't just commit these crimes impulsively. He systematized the emotional and psychological destruction of women. He turned intimate relationships into hunting expeditions." Then came my turn to speak. I'd prepared a victim impact statement, but standing there in that courtroom, looking at the man who'd tried to destroy me, I spoke from the heart instead. "Your Honor, 3 months ago, I thought my life was over. I thought Marcus had taken everything from me, my dignity, my privacy, my relationships with people I loved. But he actually gave me something invaluable. He showed me exactly who I am when everything is stripped away." I looked directly at Marcus as I spoke, and he couldn't meet my eyes. "I am not a victim. I am not broken. I am not small. I am a woman who refuses to let anyone else's cruelty define my worth. And I'm standing here today not just for myself, but for every woman he's hurt and every woman he might hurt in the future." The judge nodded and then addressed Marcus directly. "Mr. Thompson, you have pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges. The evidence shows a pattern of predatory behavior that goes far beyond the immediate victim. This court sentences you to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised probation. You will register as a cyberstalker. Surrender all electronic devices for monitoring and pay restitution to all identified victims." But then came the part that made everything worth it. Additionally, this court is ordering the immediate destruction of all intimate images and private communications. In your possession, the device you used to victimize these women will be forensically wiped and destroyed in front of this court. They brought out Marcus's phone, his precious collection, his insurance policy, and fed it into an industrial shredder right there in the courtroom. The grinding sound of metal and glass being destroyed was the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. Marcus actually whimpered as his phone was destroyed. 4 years of systematically collecting ammunition against women, gone in 30 seconds, after the sentencing, something incredible happened. 3 of the other women Marcus had victimized approached me outside the courthouse. They thanked me for being brave enough to come forward, for giving them the courage to speak up, for showing them that predators like Marcus could be stopped. I was too ashamed to report him, one woman told me, tears in her eyes. I thought I was alone. None of us were alone, I realized. He counted on us feeling alone. 6 months later, I received a letter from a woman I'd never met. She'd read about the case in the news and wanted to thank me for inspiring her to leave her abusive relationship. She included a photo of herself at her college graduation. She'd gone back to school after escaping her abuser. That's when I understood something profound. Marcus had tried to use my vulnerability as a weapon against me, but instead, it became the foundation of my strength. Today, I work with a nonprofit organization that helps victims of cyber abuse and revenge porn. I speak at conferences, I testify before legislators about strengthening laws against digital harassment, and I help other women understand that shame belongs to the perpetrator, not the victim. Marcus thought he was collecting insurance policies against women. Instead, he was collecting evidence of his own crimes. He thought he was building power. Instead, he was building his own prison. The last I heard, he was working in a prison laundry, earning 40 cents an hour under constant supervision. His collection is gone forever, but mine is just beginning. A collection of women who refused to stay silent, who chose courage over fear, who transformed their pain into power. He tried to make me small. Instead, he made me unstoppable. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.